He's going to play to the base. I'm going to speak to America. Newsom had done something else DeSantis hadn't expected. He'd studied tape. Hours of DeSantis's Fox hits, his hostile interviews with local reporters, his canned responses to tough questions. The insurance crisis had reached catastrophic proportions. Major companies fleeing the state, premiums skyrocketing 400%, homeowners unable to afford coverage in hurricane-prone areas. Did DeSantis address it? No, he was too busy fighting Mickey Mouse. The teacher shortage had become a full-blown emergency. The state's GDP had grown to $3.8 trillion, and despite what Fox News claimed nightly, businesses weren't fleeing. They were expanding. The 2021 recall attempt had been meant to destroy him. Republicans had poured $300 million into removing him from office, running on California's problems: homelessness, high costs, COVID restrictions. Newsom didn't just survive. He demolished the recall by a bigger margin than his original election. He'd go on Fox News, not friendly CNN or MSNBC, but actual Fox News, and calmly dismantle their narratives with facts delivered with a smile. Tucker Carlson had stopped inviting him after Newsom cheerfully destroyed every talking point about California's failure with actual statistics. He didn't get defensive or angry. He got specific. That's what real freedom looks like. Freedom from bankruptcy after a storm. Hannity tried to intervene. Governor Newsom, surely you can't compare California's earthquake risk to... But Newsom was already moving to his next card, a conductor leading a symphony of destruction. Let's discuss education, since Ron loves talking about parents' rights. Florida ranks 44th in teacher pay. 44th. Ron, you have 9,000 teacher vacancies right now. Get ready for the most shocking content on the internet. Subscribe to Shock Filer now and join the Shock Filer community that's not afraid to dive into the unknown. Shock Filer. Let's get this shockwave started. To understand how America's wannabe strongman got exposed as weak, we need to rewind to when Fox News made a fatal mistake. They gave Ron DeSantis home field advantage and assumed that would be enough. The great red state versus blue state debate had been hyped for weeks as the showdown America demanded. A preview of 2024's ideological battle served up in primetime with Sean Hannity as referee. DeSantis had every reason to feel invincible walking into that studio. Fox News was his sanctuary, the place where his culture war greatest hits always landed perfectly. Hannity wasn't just a friendly moderator. He was practically DeSantis's hype man, someone who'd spent months calling him America's governor and the future of conservatism. The audience would be packed with Florida Republicans. The questions would be softballs designed to make California look like a dystopian hellscape, while Florida gleamed as freedom's paradise. This is going to be a bloodbath, DeSantis had told his team that morning, that awkward smile spreading across his face. Newsom's walking into a buzzsaw. He's never faced real questions about his failed state. His communications director had actually used the word annihilation in their prep meeting. They'd practiced zingers about homeless encampments, crime statistics, and California's tax rates until DeSantis could recite them in his sleep. But this wasn't just about two governors trading barbs. This was about two completely different visions for America's future, and everyone knew it. DeSantis represented the new authoritarianism dressed up as freedom, banning books while claiming to fight censorship, attacking private companies while preaching free markets, silencing teachers while screaming about liberty. Newsom embodied a different path: actual governance, complex solutions to complex problems, the radical idea that government should help people, rather than hurt the right ones. The 2024 implications hung over everything like storm clouds. Trump was wounded but not dead. Biden was facing age questions, and these two governors represented the future of their parties. This debate would be the first real test of whether DeSantis's culture war crusade could survive contact with someone who'd actually read a budget report, whether Newsom's California confidence could translate in hostile territory. What DeSantis didn't know was that Gavin Newsom had been preparing for this moment like a prosecutor building a case. For 3 weeks, his team had been conducting opposition research not on DeSantis's political positions, but on Florida's actual numbers: insurance rates, teacher salaries, COVID death rates, budget projections, the boring stuff that doesn't make headlines but determines whether people can afford to live. He's going to come at me with talking points, Newsom had told his team. I'm going to come at him with his own data. He's going to perform. I'm going to govern. He's going to play to the base. I'm going to speak to America. Newsom had done something else DeSantis hadn't expected. He'd studied tape. Hours of DeSantis's Fox hits, his hostile interviews with local reporters, his canned responses to tough questions. He'd identified the telltale signs of when DeSantis was uncomfortable. The delayed blink, the slight stammer, the retreat to memorized phrases. He knew that underneath the tough guy exterior was someone who'd never actually been tested. The night of the debate, DeSantis strutted into the Fox News studio like a conquering hero. He glad-handed the audience, joked with Hannity during commercial breaks, adjusted his red tie that matched the set's Republican-friendly lighting. He looked across at Newsom, tall, tan, with that California ease that made DeSantis's forced intensity look even more awkward, and saw a lamb being led to slaughter. Newsom was indeed smiling, but not for the reasons DeSantis assumed. Hidden in his jacket pocket were note cards containing something more devastating than any opposition research. The truth about Florida, meticulously documented and ready to deploy. DeSantis thought he'd crush the California liberal with volume and vindictiveness. He was about to learn why preparation beats propaganda, why facts trump fear, and why you should never underestimate someone who's actually done their homework. While DeSantis practiced his tough guy act in the mirror, a real executive was doing something dangerous, actual preparation. But to understand why DeSantis would crumble so spectacularly, you need to understand how he'd built his entire political identity on fighting enemies who couldn't fight back. Ron DeSantis's rise to national prominence was a masterclass in manufactured machismo. He didn't become America's governor by solving Florida's problems. He did it by creating new ones that made for good. Fox News segments. His war on Disney wasn't about protecting children. It was about punishing a corporation for mild criticism. His crusade against drag queens wasn't about safety. It was about finding a vulnerable minority to demonize. His book-banning spree wasn't about education. It was about controlling what people could think. The formula was simple and cynical. Pick a target that tested well with the base, attack it with maximum cruelty, claim victory regardless of results. Disney said they opposed his Don't Say Gay bill, strip them of their special district status, and stick Florida taxpayers with $1 billion bill. Libraries had books acknowledging LGBTQ people exist, ban them and threaten librarians with jail time. Teachers wanted to discuss racism, fire them and replace them with veterans who didn't even have teaching credentials. This anti-woke warrior branding was political cocaine for a Republican base addicted to outrage. DeSantis had learned from Trump that you didn't need to govern well, you just needed to hurt the right people loudly enough. Every cruel policy, every vindictive press conference, every theatrical signing ceremony was designed to make him look tough. And to people who confused cruelty with strength, it worked. But while DeSantis was cosplaying as a strongman, Florida was falling apart in ways that actually mattered to real people's lives. The insurance crisis had reached catastrophic proportions. Major companies fleeing the state, premiums skyrocketing, 400% homeowners unable to afford coverage in hurricane-prone areas. Did DeSantis address it? No, he was too busy fighting Mickey Mouse. The teacher shortage had become a full-blown emergency. Florida ranked 48th in teacher pay, and DeSantis' solution was to lower standards so desperately that people with no teaching experience could run classrooms. Thousands of educator positions sat empty while he held press conferences about woke indoctrination. Students suffered while he scored points. Climate change was literally drowning Florida cities, with Miami Beach spending millions just to keep roads above water during high tide. DeSantis' response? Ban the phrase climate change from state documents and pretend the problem didn't exist. Hurricane damage was increasing exponentially, but acknowledging that would mean admitting his corporate donors might be part of the problem. Behind the tough guy facade was something even more damaging. Ron DeSantis was profoundly weird in person. His interpersonal skills were so awkward that his own staff called him disaster behind his back. He couldn't make small talk, couldn't read social cues, couldn't connect with voters unless he was delivering a prepared attack on some manufactured enemy. The man who wanted to be president couldn't even pretend to enjoy eating corn dogs at the Iowa State Fair without looking like an alien attempting human behavior. His attempts at relatability were painful to watch. The forced smile that never reached his eyes, the robotic laugh at his own jokes, the way he stood too close to people during conversations, then backed away abruptly like he'd remembered a training video about personal space. He was a tough guy action figure, impressive from a distance, but up close you could see the hollow plastic. Recent polls had started reflecting what Floridians already knew. The act was wearing thin. His approval ratings had dropped 15 points in 6 months. Even Republicans were privately grumbling about insurance bills while he fought drag queens. The anti-woke shtick that had seemed so powerful was starting to look like what it always was, a distraction from actual governance. His presidential campaign had revealed the fatal flaw in his strategy. You can only fight enemies who can't fight back for so long. Eventually, you have to face someone with resources, intelligence, and the ability to punch back. DeSantis had built his entire identity on bullying the vulnerable, trans kids, teachers, librarians, theme park employees. He'd never faced an equal opponent who could expose him. Walking into that Fox News studio, DeSantis still believed his own hype. He thought being cruel to the powerless had made him powerful. He thought culture war victories against drag queens had prepared him for actual political combat. He thought his paper tiger routine would work on someone who'd actually governed a real state with real problems. He was about to discover the difference between bullying the defenseless and facing someone who could defend themselves. The tough guy act that had worked on librarians was about to meet someone who'd done their homework. And paper tigers, as it turns out, burn pretty quickly when exposed to real fire. While DeSantis practiced his tough guy act in the mirror, a real executive was doing something dangerous. Actual preparation. Gavin Newsom hadn't become governor of the world's 5th largest economy by picking fights with theme parks. He'd done it by mastering something DeSantis never bothered to learn: the boring, essential art of actually governing. California's economy under Newsom wasn't just big, it was booming in ways that made Florida look like a lemonade stand. While DeSantis fought drag queens, Newsom had overseen the growth of an economy larger than the United Kingdom's: tech, entertainment, agriculture, manufacturing. California dominated sectors Florida could only dream about. The state's GDP had grown to $8 trillion, and despite what Fox News claimed nightly, businesses weren't fleeing. They were expanding. The 2021 recall attempt had been meant to destroy him. Republicans had poured $300 million into removing him from office, running on California's problems: homelessness, high costs, COVID restrictions. Newsom didn't just survive, he demolished the recall by a bigger margin than his original election. How? By doing something radical in modern politics. She owed up everywhere, answered every question, and explained complex policies like voters were adults who could handle nuance. "Kill them with competence" became his unofficial motto after the recall. While other politicians relied on sound bites and slogans, Newsom would show up to hostile town halls with binders full of data. A farmer angry about water restrictions? Here's the soil moisture analysis and long-term sustainability projections. A business owner mad about regulations? Let's go through the cost-benefit analysis together. He turned every attack into a teaching moment, every criticism into a conversation about solutions. His mastery of hostile media environments had become legendary among political operatives. He'd go on Fox News, not friendly CNN or MSNBC, but actual Fox News, and calmly dismantle their narratives with facts delivered with a smile. Tucker Carlson had stopped inviting him after Newsom cheerfully destroyed every talking point about California's failure with actual statistics. He didn't get defensive or angry, he got specific. The budget situation perfectly illustrated the difference between Newsom and DeSantis. California, despite its massive social programs and investments, was running historic surpluses, nearly $100 billion in surplus at one point, money that went to schools, infrastructure, and returning cash to taxpayers. Meanwhile, Florida was playing shell games with its budget,
hiding deficits behind federal COVID funds while cutting essential services. DeSantis would brag about fiscal responsibility, while Newsom was literally sending rebate checks to Californians. But Newsom's real secret weapon was something almost extinct in modern politics. He actually read the briefing materials. All of them. Budget analyses, environmental impact reports, health department statistics. The man consumed information like others consumed coffee. His staff joked that he was the only politician who complained briefing books weren't detailed enough. While DeSantis was tweeting about wokeness, Newsom was studying water table data and supply chain logistics. This preparation went beyond just knowledge. It was about understanding connections. Newsom could explain how port efficiency in Long Beach affected prices in Iowa, how California's climate policies created jobs in Ohio, how investing in education today saved money on prisons tomorrow. He didn't just govern California. He understood how California fit into America and the world. His preparation for the DeSantis debate had been characteristic. No practiced zingers or rehearsed outrage. Instead, 3 weeks of studying Florida's actual numbers, insurance rates by county, teacher retention statistics by year, COVID death rates adjusted for age demographics, infrastructure spending versus needs. The boring stuff that actually determined whether people's lives got better or worse. DeSantis is going to come with theater, Newsom told his team. I'm going to come with receipts. He's going to play to the Fox News audience. I'm going to speak to Americans who are tired of performance art instead of performance. His team had watched him prepare with something approaching awe. While most politicians practiced lines, Newsom practiced explaining complex policies in simple terms. While others memorized attacks, he memorized numbers. His debate prep looked less like political theater and more like a graduate seminar in public administration. The night before the debate, while DeSantis was probably practicing his tough guy squint in the mirror, Newsom was on a conference call with California's insurance commissioner, understanding exactly how Florida's insurance crisis compared to California's regulated market. He wasn't preparing to win a debate. He was preparing to govern in public, to show the difference between a real executive and a culture war performer. This wasn't arrogance. It was confidence born from competence. Newsom knew that in a battle between someone who fought imaginary enemies and someone who solved real problems, reality had a way of winning. He'd built the world's 5th largest economy, while DeSantis had built a brand on banning books. He'd managed complexity while DeSantis manufactured controversy. Walking into that Fox News studio, Newsom carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who'd done their homework. Not just for this debate, but for his entire career. He was about to show America the difference between governing and grandstanding, between substance and slogans, between a real executive and a paper tiger. The slaughter was about to begin. And it would be done with spreadsheets, not sound bites. And then Newsom pulled out his first card, and Ron DeSantis' night went from bad to historically humiliating. But first, DeSantis had to walk into the trap with all the confidence of a man who'd never met a fact he couldn't ignore. The debate opened exactly as DeSantis had dreamed. Hannity's first question was basically a campaign ad. Governor DeSantis, California has the highest taxes, worst crime, and most people fleeing to free states like Florida. How do you explain your success compared to Governor Newsom's failures? It was like being served a meatball pitched underhand, and DeSantis swung hard. Sean, it's simple, DeSantis began, that practiced half-smile spreading across his face. California is what happens when woke ideology meets reality. They have tent cities on every corner, criminals running free, and taxes so high that even their millionaires are fleeing to Florida. He was in his element now, hitting every Fox News talking point with the precision of someone who'd rehearsed in the mirror. The audience, packed with Florida Republicans, ate it up. Applause filled the studio as DeSantis continued his greatest hits. In Florida, we believe in freedom. In California, they believe in failure. We protect parents' rights. They protect criminals' rights. We cut taxes. They cut police budgets. Hannity, playing his role perfectly, turned to Newsom with theatrical concern. Governor,
How do you respond to these devastating facts about your state's decline? But Newsom wasn't devastated. He wasn't even perturbed. He was taking notes, his pen moving steadily across a small notepad, occasionally looking up with that California smile that made DeSantis's forced grin look even more artificial. Sean, I'm just writing down all of Governor DeSantis's claims. I want to make sure I address each one with actual data. Please, Ron, continue. The casual use of Ron instead of Governor DeSantis was the first tell that Newsom wasn't playing by the expected rules. DeSantis bristled slightly but pressed on, emboldened by what he mistook for weakness. The numbers don't lie, Gavin, DeSantis shot back, trying to match the informality, but sounding like a robot attempting human speech. California has the highest poverty rate when adjusted for cost of living. You've got rolling blackouts while we keep the lights on. You've got homeless encampments while we have law and order. Each claim got bigger, each attack more sweeping. DeSantis was feeling it now, feeding off the audience energy, going beyond his prepared remarks. This was easier than he'd expected. Newsom was just sitting there taking notes like a student while the professor lectured. Maybe the California governor wasn't ready for prime time after all. And let's talk about freedom, DeSantis continued, his confidence soaring. In Florida, we kept businesses open. In California, you destroyed livelihoods with lockdowns. We trusted parents. You forced masks on children. We followed the science. You followed the politics. Hannity jumped in with another assist. Governor DeSantis makes excellent points about the freedom agenda. Florida's approach has clearly delivered better results. That's when DeSantis made his fatal error. Drunk on his own performance, riding high on audience approval, and Hannity's encouragement, he departed from script entirely. The bottom line is this: Florida freedom delivers results. Our unemployment is lower, our growth is higher, our people are happier. We're the model for America, while California is the cautionary tale. The numbers prove it. Newsom's pen stopped moving. He looked up, and his smile widened just a fraction. It was the smile of a poker player who just watched his opponent go all in with a pair of twos. The numbers prove it, Newsom repeated, his voice carrying a hint of something DeSantis should have recognized as danger. Ron, I'm so glad you brought up numbers, because I happen to have some right here. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small stack of index cards. The studio lights caught them as he placed them carefully on the podium. DeSantis' smile flickered for just a moment. Those weren't notes. Those were weapons. Since you're so confident about Florida's results, Newsom continued, his voice maintaining that conversational tone that somehow made the moment feel more ominous. Why don't we look at some actual numbers? I mean, you did say the numbers don't lie, right? The trap had been set, baited, and sprung. DeSantis had walked in with talking points. Newsom had come with receipts. And everyone in that studio, including Sean Hannity, suddenly realized this wasn't going to go the way they'd planned. Let's talk about freedom, Ron. Freedom to afford insurance? Newsom's voice was conversational, almost friendly, as he flipped his first card. The studio lights caught the neat handwriting, and the camera zoomed in just enough for viewers to see this wasn't theater. This was evidence. According to your own Florida Office of Insurance Regulation, homeowners' insurance premiums have increased 421% since you took office. 421%, Ron. Newsom let that number hang in the air like a guilty verdict. 6 major insurance companies have fled your state entirely. Citizens Property Insurance, your state-run insurer of last resort, is now the largest in Florida, with 3 million policies and facing insolvency. DeSantis' face began its transformation. The confident smirk melted away, replaced by something between confusion and constipation. That's misleading. We have unique challenges with climate change? Newsom interrupted smoothly. The climate change you pretend doesn't exist? The one you banned state agencies from even mentioning? He flipped to the next card. Meanwhile, California's regulated insurance market has kept increases to 38% over the same period. Our homeowners can actually afford coverage. And that's what real freedom looks like. Freedom from bankruptcy after a storm. Hannity tried to intervene. Governor Newsom, surely you can't compare California's earthquake risk to... But Newsom was already moving to his next card, a conductor leading a symphony of destruction. Let's discuss education, since Ron loves talking about parents' rights. Florida ranks 44th in teacher pay. 44th, Ron. You have 9,000 teacher vacancies right now. 9,000. Your solution? Letting veterans teach without certification and recruiting from overseas because Americans won't work for poverty wages in your state. The camera caught DeSantis's Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed hard. Sweat was beginning to form on his forehead, visible even under the carefully applied TV makeup. His eyes darted to his staff off camera, seeking rescue that wasn't coming. But hey, at least you banned books, right? Newsom continued, his tone maintaining that devastating friendliness. 1,557 books banned under your watch, including math textbooks. Math textbooks, Ron, for mentioning race. Meanwhile, California ranks 20th in education. Not great, but we're working on it. You're working on... what? Making sure kids can't read The Diary of Anne Frank? That's a complete mischaracterization, DeSantis started, his voice climbing higher. Is it? Newsom flipped another card. Let's talk fiscal responsibility then. You claim Florida's the model. Your state budget relies on $8 billion in federal COVID funds to balance. Money that runs out next year? California? We have a $38 billion rainy day fund. We sent Nolly. $5 billion back to taxpayers in rebates. You sent your taxpayers insurance bills they can't pay. DeSantis was now visibly sweating, the moisture catching the studio lights. His hands gripped the podium edges, knuckles white. He tried to interrupt again, but his voice cracked. California has the highest taxes and the highest median income, Newsom countered without missing a beat. Our per capita income is $89,000. Florida's? $59,000. Our minimum wage is $15. $50. Yours is $12. Californians make more, save more, and yes, pay more in taxes for better schools, better roads, better health care. It's called investing in your people, Ron. You should try it. Hannity was now openly panicking, shuffling papers, looking for a way to change topics. Gentlemen, perhaps we should discuss immigration. But Newsom wasn't done. He pulled out the card he'd been saving, handling it with the reverence of someone about to deliver a death blow. Since Ron brought up COVID response, let's look at your own Florida Department of Health data. Age-adjusted COVID death rate per 100,000. Florida, 287. California, 241. You let 46 more people per 100,000 die for your freedom, Ron. That's 10,000 excess deaths. 10,000 Floridians who'd be alive if you'd matched California's response. The studio fell silent except for the hum of electronics. DeSantis's face had gone from red to white to a concerning shade of gray. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came. The man who always had a cruel quip ready couldn't form a single syllable. But here's what really gets me, Newsom said, his voice dropping lower, forcing Yon to lean in. You talk about freedom while attacking Disney for disagreeing with you. You talk about liberty while threatening to jail teachers and librarians. You talk about parental rights while telling parents their trans kids can't play sports or get health care. He set down his cards and looked directly at DeSantis, who seemed to shrink under the gaze. You're not tough, Ron. You're just mean to people who can't fight back. You attack drag queens because they can't afford lawyers. You ban books because librarians can't lobby. You demonize teachers because they're too busy actually working to fight your culture wars. DeSantis finally found his voice, but it came out as a strangled squeak. You're twisting everything. Florida is the free state of what? Newsom interrupted one final time. Of unaffordable insurance? Of teacher shortages? Of banned books? Of excess deaths? That's not freedom, Ron. That's failure dressed up in a flag. The camera caught it all. DeSantis's complete disintegration. Hannity's desperate attempts to save his guest. The audience's stunned silence.
The Florida governor who'd entered the studio like a conquering hero now looked like a broken action figure, sweating through his makeup, stammering half responses, his eyes pleading for someone, anyone, to make it stop. Newsom gathered his cards with the satisfied air of a professor who'd just finished a particularly effective lecture. He'd promised to kill with competence. He'd delivered a massacre with mathematics. And everyone watching, including Ron DeSantis, now understood the difference between a real governor and a bully who'd finally picked on someone his own size. But this was about more than one bad night for Ron. This was about what happens when performance meets competence. Within seconds of Newsom's final blow, the political internet exploded like a nuclear reactor achieving critical mass. Newsom destroys. Ron shot past DeSantis debate so fast that Twitter's trending algorithm seemed to hiccup in disbelief. The first sign of total conservative panic came when Fox News, the network that never met a commercial break, it didn't delay for Republican talking points, suddenly cut to ads mid-conversation. Hannity had been desperately trying to throw DeSantis a lifeline. But Governor DeSantis, surely the freedom agenda, when producers apparently decided watching their golden boy drown on live TV was bad for business. The abrupt cut to a MyPillow commercial became instantly memeable, with liberals joking that even Mike Lindell's conspiracy theories were more coherent than Dietz. DeSantis' debate performance. Conservative Twitter went into full meltdown mode, cycling through the 5 stages of grief at broadband speed. First came denial. DeSantis destroyed Newsom. Only libs think otherwise. Then anger. Fox News sabotaged our governor with biased questions. Bargaining arrived quickly. If you actually watch the full context, depression set in as the clips spread. Maybe DeSantis isn't ready for prime time. Finally, acceptance, or at least deflection. This is why Trump is still the real leader. Ben Shapiro, who'd spent months promoting DeSantis as the future of conservatism, posted a 47-part thread explaining why debate performance doesn't matter, and policy results speak for themselves, conveniently ignoring that Newsom had just destroyed DeSantis with his own policy results. The thread reeked of desperation, like watching someone try to explain why their sports team actually won despite the 50-point loss. Behind the scenes, Florida Republicans were apoplectic. Text messages leaked within hours showed state legislators furious at DeSantis for walking into such an obvious trap. He looked like a fucking amateur, one state senator texted. Newsom made him look like a substitute teacher who didn't read the lesson plan. Another simply wrote, "We're fucked for 2024. The Trump response was swift and merciless. On Truth Social, the former president posted, "DeSanctimonious got destroyed by Gavin Newsom. Couldn't even handle basic questions about his failing state. Not ready for prime time. Some people have it, some don't. I told you so." He followed up with 3 more posts, each more mocking than the last, clearly delighting in his rival's humiliation. Liberal Twitter, meanwhile, was experiencing something between shock and euphoria. They'd expected Newsom to hold his own, maybe land a few punches. They hadn't expected to watch him perform surgery on live television. Did we just win a debate on Fox News? Became a common refrain. The disbelief was palpable. It was like watching the Washington Generals beat the Harlem Globetrotters. The memes came fast and furious. DeSantis' sweating face became the new nervous guy template. Newsom's card flip was edited into every card game scene in cinema history. Someone created a "Florida man gets destroyed by California fax" headline that went mega viral. TikTokers were already creating POV, "You're Ron DeSantis realizing you can't ban math" videos. The post-debate scenes told the whole story. Newsom strolled through the Fox News building like he owned it, stopping for every interview, smiling for every selfie. He did 5 minutes with Fox Business, 10 minutes with local affiliates, even chatted with the janitor. His confidence was infectious. Staffers reported he was cracking jokes, asking about people's kids, acting like he'd just finished a pleasant dinner rather than a political murder. DeSantis, meanwhile, had vanished. His team hustled him out a side door before the credits finished rolling. No spin room appearance, no reporter gaggles, no nothing. The man who never met a camera he didn't like had suddenly developed a severe allergy to media. His motorcade was spotted speeding toward the airport, while his communications team desperately tried to figure out how to spin getting intellectually pantsed on national television. The conservative ecosystem went into emergency mode. Fox News primetime hosts suddenly discovered urgent breaking news that required wall-to-wall coverage. Newsmax pivoted to Hunter Biden's laptop. OAN ran a documentary about migrant caravans, anything to avoid showing clips of their supposed future president getting dismantled by a California Democrat with note cards. By midnight, the political landscape had shifted. DeSantis's presidential ambitions were on life support. Newsom had become a Democratic superhero. And somewhere in Mar-a-Lago, Donald Trump was probably pouring himself an extra Diet Coke in celebration, watching his biggest rival for 2024, self-destruct in real time. The earthquake wasn't just about one debate. It was about what happens when the conservative movement's addiction to performance politics finally met someone who'd done their homework. The paper tiger had been exposed, and no amount of spin could put the stuffing back in. But this was about more than one bad night for Ron. This was about what happens when performance meets competence, and why that collision matters for the future of American democracy. Newsom hadn't just won a debate. He'd exposed the fatal flaw in the modern conservative movement's addiction to theatrical governance over actual results. The power of preparation in hostile environments cannot be overstated. Newsom had walked into Fox News, the Death Star of conservative media, and turned it into his own classroom. He'd shown that when you have facts on your side, when you've done the actual work of governance, you don't need friendly moderators or sympathetic audiences. Truth, properly prepared and calmly delivered, creates its own safe space. This was a masterclass for Democrats who'd spent years playing defense, afraid to venture into hostile territory. Newsom proved that enemy turf becomes neutral ground when you bring receipts. Every Democrat running in a red state, every progressive facing a hostile town hall, every liberal going on conservative media now had a template. Don't match their energy. Exceed their preparation. The way DeSantis crumbled when confronted with facts revealed something essential about bullies in politics. They're not actually strong. They just pick weak targets. DeSantis had built his entire brand on attacking drag queens, librarians, and teachers because they couldn't fight back with million-dollar war chests or media platforms. But when faced with an equal opponent armed with data, the tough guy act evaporated like morning dew in the Florida heat. The California versus Florida narrative had been flipped completely. For years, conservative media had painted California as a failed state and Florida as free market paradise. In one evening, Newsom had shown that California's problems were real but manageable, while Florida's successes were mostly marketing. California had budget surpluses. Florida had hidden deficits. California had regulated insurance markets. Florida had an insurance apocalypse. California invested in education. Florida banned books. This exposed the crucial importance of executives who actually govern versus those who just perform. Newsom's command of detail, insurance rates, teacher salaries, death statistics, showed what happened when someone treated governance as a serious responsibility rather than a reality show. While DeSantis had spent his term crafting viral moments, Newsom had spent his crafting policy. The difference was devastating when put side by side. The lesson was clear. Competence beats culture wars when given a fair hearing. DeSantis had bet everything on the idea that attacking wokeness mattered more than solving problems. But when Newsom asked about insurance rates, teacher shortages, and COVID deaths, suddenly the culture war seemed like what it was, a distraction from failure. You can't pay an insurance bill with anti-woke rhetoric. You can't staff a classroom with banned books. You can't bring back the dead with freedom slogans. For Democrats, this provided a model for fighting on enemy turf that didn't require adopting enemy tactics. You don't need to get dirty when you can get specific. You don't need to shout when you can cite. You don't need to attack when you can simply reveal. Newsom had shown that the best response to performative politics wasn't better performance. It was actual results. The broader implications for American democracy were profound. In an era where style had seemed to triumph over substance, where the loudest voice won regardless of what it was saying,
Newsom had demonstrated that competence still mattered. That voters, even Fox News viewers, could recognize the difference between someone who governed and someone who gesticulated. This wasn't about California versus Florida or Democrat versus Republican. It was about two fundamentally different approaches to power. One approach treated governance as theater, where the performance mattered more than results. The other treated it as responsibility, where results mattered more than applause. When these approaches met head-to-head, theater crumbled and responsibility triumphed. The lesson for aspiring leaders was clear. Do the work. Read the briefings. Understand the details. Know your numbers. Because eventually, you'll face someone who did their homework, and all the bluster in the world won't save you from someone armed with facts. DeSantis had learned this the hard way, sweating through his makeup on national television. For voters, the lesson was equally clear. Demand substance. Require receipts. Judge leaders not by how loudly they fight your perceived enemies, but by how effectively they solve your actual problems. Because the difference between a leader who performs and a leader who governs isn't just political, it's personal. It's the difference between affordable insurance and bankruptcy, between funded schools and teacher shortages, between life and death in a pandemic. Competence wasn't just better than culture wars. In the end, it was the only thing that actually mattered. Remember DeSantis's panicked face, sweat cutting through his TV makeup as Newsom calmly read to you, "Hose insurance statistics?" That wasn't just perspiration. That was the physical manifestation of what happens when authoritarian theatrics meet actual accountability. That was the look of a bully realizing his victims had been taking notes. In one devastating evening, a prepared governor demolished years of carefully crafted strongman mythology. DeSantis had built his brand on cruelty disguised as strength, on punching down while calling it leadership. But Newsom proved that when you punch up, when you come armed with facts instead of fear, data instead of demagoguery, the fake tough guys fold like cheap suits in the Florida humidity. This is what we must demand from every leader. Not performance, but preparation. Not culture wars, but competence. Not enemies lists, but insurance statistics. When politicians tell you they're fighting for your freedom, ask them for the numbers. When they claim they're making your state great, demand the receipts. When they spend more time banning books than balancing budgets, show them the door. The power of facts over fascist rhetoric isn't just theoretical. We watched it work in real time. DeSantis came with talking points. Newsom came with truth. DeSantis brought theater. Newsom brought thermometers to take Florida's temperature. And when the diagnosis came back terminal, all the tough guy posturing in the world couldn't hide the symptoms. This is how democracy defends itself. Not through matching the authoritarians' cruelty, but through exposing their incompetence. Not through outrage, but through outcomes. Not through performance, but through performance metrics that actually matter to people's lives. Want to see more authoritarians meet accountability? More paper tigers exposed as frauds? More bullies discovering that governing is harder than grandstanding? Subscribe now. Because every view is a vote for substance over spectacle. Every share spreads the message that competence matters. And every new subscriber sends a signal that Americans are done with strongmen who are weak on solutions. The show must go on. And the reviews for authoritarian theater are getting worse every night.